Hello everyone,
Hi
I'm
everyone.
Sriram.
I'm Andriy, and today we're going to talk to you about Infinity and beyond. It's about data sources ecosystem at Grafana, about the past, present, and the future. Let's get started. So Grafana is a unique open source software that allows you to integrate data from various hundreds data sources and systems into one single pane of glass. And we call this Grafana Big Tent philosophy. And the best part of it is that you can connect to your data and visualize it in Grafana without actually moving your data to Grafana. And in the course of lifetime of Grafana, in the 11 years, together with community, we created around 150 data sources. And recently we added data sources like Looker, SumoLogic, PagerDuty, DynamoDB, SerialDB, as Mitch mentioned yesterday, a lot of DBs to our catalog. And more plugins are in development, and even more are in the pipeline.
Okay, this 150 data source plugins is just not another feature, just not a fancy number, but it's the entire Grafana data sources journey and the observability journey. So over this 10, 11 years, we developed new plugins, we learned a lot, we failed several times, we corrected our mistakes, and we never hesitated to change things.
Yeah, let's take a look at what has changed over time. So Grafana initially was created as a fork of Kibana to visualize the data from Graphite, and later on we started to add more and more data sources. And in the early days of Grafana, as you can see, all our data sources, we were able to fit them in this small drop-down. And now if you go to Grafana and create a new data source, you will see this ever-growing, like huge, long list of data sources.
Okay. So not only we scaled number of plugins, but we also adding new features, new capabilities to our plugins. Say for example, our query editors. So can you imagine the query editor, first query editor of Prometheus just have a simple text box which accepts inputs, no auto-completion, no query builders. But now we evolved into a modern advanced query builders which does lots of job for you to make your queries. And not only these query builders, we also added many UX-friendly features such as making your learning your query within the query builder. Say example, kickstart your query, explain your query, and lots of features we are adding to our query builders. And we are also adding AI-based query builders in some of our data sources. So many things change in the querying world.
Alongside query builders, our configuration pages for data sources also have changed. Not only we add new features and capabilities, but we also try to make them easier to use and set up. And for example, recently, in the last year, we did this configuration redesign project, where we redesigned and updated the configuration pages of the most used data sources that we have. So our goal is for you to have this successful connection message as soon as possible and with less effort.
Okay, not only the query builders, config builders, but underlying tools also change. So one of the biggest changes, initially our plugins were created using AngularJS, which is already deprecated. As Mitch mentioned, we are going to completely remove in the next Grafana, and we have put it behind feature flag. So that's one of the biggest transition. So lots of tooling also changed how we develop the plugins.
And the way we scaffold and bundle our plugins also has changed. So previously we had this Grafana toolkit package that is now deprecated. It was good, it was working, it was doing its job, except the cases when it wasn't working, and then it caused us a lot of trouble. So we learned from that and created this new Grafana Create plugin that is now the standard for scaffolding and bundling your plugins frontend.
So not only the way we scaffold the plugins change, the way we publish the plugins also change. Can you imagine 5 years back, if you are a data source developer, you want to publish a plugin, you just go to the repository and put all your details and create a PR to publish a plugin. Now it's just a simple click of the form and submit in the grafana.com. You can submit as many as new versions you can with a single click. So many things changed.
And as you can see, even the way we spell Grafana has changed. So in the early days, maybe 10 years ago, it happened that Grafana was spelled differently, but now we try to make sure we have these spell checks to make sure that Grafana is always spelled correctly, and spellings like Grafana or Grabana are not allowed anymore.
Right. So many things change, as said, but only thing that didn't change is the need for more plugins. Our customers, our community wants to bring their data from many sources into Grafana and make the big tent bigger. And also, as the software ecosystem evolves, there is always a need for more and more plugins. New tools coming in, new applications we are developing, so always there is a need for new plugins.
We are continuously expanding the catalog of our data sources, but the speed is not enough to cover all the needs of our customers and users. But we wanted the community still to empower them to bring their data and visualize it into Grafana, even when data sources are not created yet. So here where Infinity data source comes into rescue. Now Sriram will share a bit more about the story about Infinity and its features.
Okay, so what is Infinity Data Source plugin? So this is the data source plugin which you can download it from Grafana catalog like any other plugin. But what makes it special? So this is a universal data source plugin which allows you to pull data from multiple sources, multiple applications using their REST APIs. If your application provides some REST APIs, you can use it Infinity to connect. So you don't need to wait for a new plugin to come up. So this means we are referring this as our go-to plugin for cases when there is no native plugin exist. So if you don't have a native plugin for some of the things such as Sneak or something, you can use our Infinity data source plugin and connect and get the data. As you see in the screenshot, so you just put this URL of your API endpoint and get the data and do some data messaging if required, and you will get the data. Right, how this all started. So in 2020, actually, as a hobby project, I wanted to visualize some of the interesting data I found in Wikipedia in Grafana. So at the time, I had very limited options. Either I can write some Prometheus exporter and scrap the things and publish into Prometheus or Influx, then visualize. There is also another option. I can use existing simple JSON API, which is our preprocessor of this Infinity plugin. I could have used that, but the developer in me asked me to do some adventurous thing. I want to develop a new data source plugin, which is where the Infinity comes in. So when I developed Infinity I created as a data source plugin to just scrap content from any HTML page. Then once I developed, I quickly realized, okay, it has more potential, not only the HTML. So if it can scrap the HTML and convert into some nice graphs, it can also capable of doing data, pulling data from any other formats, like JSON, CSV. Like, we often refer this Infinity as a versatile plugin or a Swiss Army knife of plugins because it can connect many things, it has many capabilities, you can play around a lot. So it covers very basic use cases and also to the complex use cases. Say, for example, very basic use cases such as just pasting your CSV URL and getting the data visualized. And the complex examples such as you connecting to some GraphQL APIs, visualizing your application traces data, and do something like that. So it covers versatile use cases. Okay, as I mentioned, Infinity supports different data formats, JSON, CSV, XM. And the way the Infinity is designed, it's also make us easy to add more formats in future. Say, for example, if there is we want to create graphs from YAML file. No one do that. But if you want to do that, we can support that in future. Right? Let's see what other response format Infinity helps. Okay, the most common use case for the Infinity is to visualize the JSON data. As you see here in the screen, I am visualizing some of the data from an IoT platform called ThinkSpeak. So which sends me some sensor data about the traffic situation in some of them. As you can see, that's a nice JSON. So I don't need to write any new plugin. So I can simply use Infinity to visualize the data. So here in the right screenshot, you see I'm just putting an URL of the feed, which is public. I'm simply selecting the fields I want and saying, okay, this is my fields, this is my format I want to use. Then you get the data out of the box. Okay, you can try this yourself in this play.grafana URL, play.grafana/infinity.json. We can share this later. Okay. Another most common format Infinity support is like a delimited format, like CSV or TSV or any other delimited format. So here you can see I am visualizing a public public GitHub data I found, which is talk about natural disasters over the years. So same as JSON, I'm just pasting the CSV URL and selecting the fields, and I make sure they're correctly formatted. Say, for example, here it says year, but I need to explicitly make sure this is parsed as date, not just number. And also dates, I want to make sure this is a number, not the date. So I need to specify all these details to get this graph. Okay, the same principle goes with XML as well, like JSON CSV. So here I am just visualizing the status feeds from Google Cloud, which is it can be any RSS or any JSON format. Sorry, RSS or Atom format, XML format. So here you see I am getting all the incidents. I'm selecting the same way as how I did my JSON CSV. I'm putting the URL and selecting the fields, and even I'm just doing some aliasing thing and all those things. So, and I get the details of the JSON. Think about you have some legacy application which have some SOAP APIs still we are stuck with, but you can still visualize the data from those SOAP APIs using this Infinity plugin. Right. So since we can talk mostly about this JSON, HTTP, CSV things, it also needed for Infinity to support other HTTP-based options. Say, for example, you want to customize your headers, you want to customize your query string, you may want to customize your body. So Infinity have those options. So that means with all these options, now you can easily connect your GraphQL endpoints as well, not only the REST API endpoints. So here in this example, I am visualizing some public data from GraphQL, which shows me the list of countries and some relevant details. Okay, so here in the bottom you see we have some variables in Grafana. In GraphQL, I want to pass it. So in the Infinity GraphQL, it also supports passing the Grafana variables to the underlying variables. So you get the data only what you want. And also there is a play.grafana URL you can play around. Okay, so we got the data. We got the data from JSON, we got the data from CSV, but what next? So all the time the data doesn't need to be in the format you like. Sometimes you need to do some data massaging. Like sometimes you may need to do aggregation, sometimes you may need to filter out the data, and you need to do some transformation. Of course, there's a Grafana transformation which can help, but what cool is if the data source itself can do the transformation, that's awesome, like any other SQL stuff. Let's see what are the parsing options we have over the time. So Infinity provides several parsing options. So initially when I created this Infinity, I started with the simple parsing options. Say, for example, it automatically tried to parse all the array objects and visualize your data. So that means it's a very simple and basic use cases. All the parsing happening in the browser, the front end. So here you can see I'm selecting the default parser in the query, and I'm also selecting from this JSON, I'm selecting country as my root object and selecting the fields. Okay, before that, that's an example. So here I'm using a public API, which allows you to check how popular your name is. Some nationalized something I go. Where I'm putting in my name, I'm getting the results. So I'm searching for Sriram. Okay, Sriram is popular in India and Singapore. So something like that. So I can visualize this data in the Grafana like this. So you can select the simple parser and select the fields. I select the country and country ID probability, and you get the data. And then we realized, okay, we have this simple parser. It is not enough for doing aggregation and filtering and other stuff. So we need some complex parsing options. So we introduced UQL later in Grafana, Infinity 0.4 version, which is something similar to other query languages such as SplunkQL, Custo. So it's a bit flexible in terms of parsing. So it does provide various options to do post-processing of data like filtering and manipulating things. So here in this example, I'm visualizing some data from an analytics site called MetaMode demo data. So here with the simple queries, and I'm visualizing the data. Right. So again, all this UQL and front-end parser happens everything in the front-end, but in Grafana world, what we want is we want more. So we want our data needs to be backend compatible. So that means we can do the alerting, we can do public dashboard, we can do query caching, we can do recorded queries, and all those nice features. So Infinity 1.0, we introduced backend parser, which means you can select the parser as a backend, then automatically your data will be processed in the backend and compatible with all the alerting systems. So here in this example, there's a simple GitHub URL which lists me some of the users' data. Okay, with the backend parser, I can simply select I want to say name, age, country, and other things. But in real world, that may not be the case. You may need to do some manipulation. So we can use JSON eta. JSON eta is a query language. You can put the JSON eta queries to do the manipulation. Say, for example, I'm doing some calculations, I'm doing some transformations, etc. So you can play around, and so as you can see, the simple JSON converted into the complex results with all the manipulations. Okay, so Infinity is not just only for the hobby users. It is also for the enterprise use cases. Most of the times, all the enterprise APIs will come up with complex authentication systems, security system, network systems. So Infinity does supports that. So basically, Infinity have several authentication options, which makes it a bit powerful to connect with multiple systems. So it supports authentication systems ranging basic auth, bearer token auth, and digest auth, and even OAuth and JWT token auth. And we also have the cloud provider-based authentication. Say, for example, AWS have a specific authentication called SigV4 authentication. Infinity does support that. Even if you are using Azure things, you want to connect your APIs behind Azure authentication, you can still use with OAuth to client credentials. And if your API is behind AWS or Google, you can use JWT and other authentications. So that means with this, all the authentication systems, you can connect to many of the possible APIs. Okay, let's see some real-time examples how we are using and how customers are using. And what's the capability of this? Okay, I have, say, for example, I have a Prometheus graph which shows me some error metrics, error rate. Suddenly my error rate goes up. I need to know why my error rate is. I can eventually start debugging, correlate with other metrics, but what happens if I'm using some cloud providers like Google, if there's a Google outage? So if you have annotations over your error graph saying, okay, there's an outage in Google in this region, because of that, your error rates are going up. So with Infinity, you can simply correlate using Grafana annotations and this JSON. You can easily visualize, okay, the error rates and that's outage. That saves me tons of time. Okay, here, this is another example. So in this example, I'm visualizing my custom application logs data. My custom application currently doesn't send the data to load queue. In that case, it just exposes only through APIs. So I can use Infinity. So as you can see, it's not only visualizing the logs as a table, it also nicely displays a Grafana logs format. As you can see, I am passing all the Grafana macros, say start time. So I don't want to pull all the logs from the API. I want to restrict and sync it with the dashboard time range. So I can pass all the dashboard context, user context, using Infinity macros to the underlying APIs. So that means you will get the only relevant data to the dashboard. And also, at the bottom, you see there's a small button, which is traces, which takes me to the corresponding traces from the trace ID. And again, this is the corresponding traces ID view. This traces ID view, again, it uses the same application, but the endpoint is now this time traces endpoint. Instead of logs endpoint, it is going to the traces endpoint. So again, with this simply passing the URL, and I'm getting all the traces data. As you see, I'm selecting the format as traces. Instead of logs, I'm selecting traces. So this transformation from the logs to traces done via our correlations, Grafana correlation features, which we announced last year. So here, these two slides are here just to prove, okay, not only Infinity visualize data, it also interact with other Grafana elements such as logs, traces, correlations. Okay, sometimes when you are calling a data, your data might be coming in few pages, like it may be in the chunks. Say first, you may need to get first 10 results, then you need to paginate for next 10 results, something like that. So Infinity does support the pagination. Here in this example, I'm calling a Pokemon API. Pokemon API send me first 2 results in the first query. Then I need to paginate again to get the next set of 2 results or 10 results. Infinity does provide those such pagination options. You can choose, okay, what the parameters you want to pass in each page, so that Infinity knows how to iterate through pages and how to consolidate before sharing to your dashboard. In real world, it's not a simple pagination. The pagination can be complex. Like some pagination can be simply number-based pagination. Get me page number 1, page number 2, something like that. Or sometimes it can be offset-based pagination. Okay, I want to offset by 10, offset by 20, something like that. You can do offset-based pagination as well. And sometimes your data will be having metadata like cursors. So cursor-based pagination. You will send like cursor in the first URL and the same, pass the cursor to the second URL like that. So Infinity does support those pagination, which will make Infinity easy to get lots of data. Okay, last week I came across with this community use cases and how community is using this Infinity. This is some examples I want to share. So here in this example, one of the user from the London visualizing their public transport data, TFL data using Grafana and Infinity. So here what they tried is they want to see when their next bus is coming using their TFL API. And what cool thing is, even they tried the backend parser, so that means now this dashboard can be accessed by public. So public dashboard feature the user is utilizing. So you can play around this cool dashboard in this URL. And another example is like here, we see the user is tracking some airport departures, but unfortunately the user doesn't have the APIs. The user doesn't have JSON or doesn't have CSV to visualize. But what they have is they see simple web page, which is very interesting for them, so they try to visualize this. So here is, as you can see, the user selected HTML type, and selected the HTML fields they want. It's a bit of fun thing to do with the HTML. So still you are able to get, the user managed to get the data from the simple HTML page, like how I did in the Wikipedia scrapping. Same way the user did for some other page and get the airport departures. It's really cool. Okay, so not only for these community use cases, there are also some complex use cases, such as this one. So here in this one of these YouTube video, a user was showing how they are connecting to the key clock application. Key clock is one of the authentication, some kind of application. But the key clock APIs are just behind authentication mechanism, OAuth 2 authentication. So the user make use of Infinity OAuth 2 authentication and specify all the details they want to pass the API, so that API can be authenticated and authorized and get the relevant data. So this is the example and how they visualize. And once you get the data, even you can do alerting on top of it. You can do all the cool Grafana things you can do. Okay, again, this is another cool example from one of the users from Japan, where the user showed how they are visualizing the stock market data. So as you can see, the user selected, maybe the screenshot is too small. The user selected a simple front-end parser, so they don't need to do any complex post-processing. They put the URL, they select the fields they want, and they get the stock market data in our candlestick chart. Okay, I'm continuously getting amazed with how many use cases our community comes up with Infinity, and also how they show their love towards the Infinity plugin. I'm really, really impressed with that. And also, there's a lot of active community members actively interacting in the community forum, Grafana community forum, asking questions and helping each other about Infinity and all the cool use cases they are trying to connect. And even recently, the Infinity got 12 million downloads in Grafana.com catalog. So along with all these community use cases, our enterprise customers are also trying many different things. Say, for example, they are trying to connect with things like Big Panda. They're trying to connect things like Sneak, or they're visualizing AWS Cloudcast or Azure security events. So lots of things they are trying to connect into Grafana and making their Grafana big tent bigger. Being said that, last February, we announced Grafana Labs now officially maintains and supports Infinity plugins. So that means it's no longer a simple one-person hobby project. So it's no longer my personal hobby project. It's officially supported by Grafana. Grafana now spends huge engineering efforts to make this better and adding more features to the Infinity. After this announcement we made in February, we quietly add lots of new features. One of the recent feature we add is like PDC support for the Infinity, which is mostly asked by our enterprise customers. They want to connect their cloud data, Grafana cloud instance, to their APIs running on-prem. So with this PDC support, they can already do this securely. And we also moved the documentation into the Grafana.com, so you can learn more about Infinity within Grafana.com itself. And even we also improved our demo instance, where you can play around and learn more about Infinity. You can play around play.grafana.org/t/infinity. We will share the link later. And with all these cool things, there is also the Infinity will remain open source. Andriy?
Okay. So as you just saw, Infinity is a great data source, and we are really happy to have it in our plugins catalog. But is it really our final destination, or do we want to stop here? Actually, no, we want to go beyond Infinity. But why to go beyond Infinity? Well, Infinity is indeed a really powerful data source. As you just saw, it was able, like single plugin was able to fetch the data from various data sources, various systems with different formats, different data types, and so on. But some users might consider this plugin a bit technical and complex. Definitely not you, Sriram. For you is everything easy, but for some users it's still a bit complex. And it kind of shifts complexity from plugin development to dashboard development, meaning that when users create panels, when they set up queries, they need to understand how the underlying APIs work, how the system works, which data it returns, how to process it, and so on. So even though Infinity helps us a lot and it fills the gap where the plugins don't exist yet, we still realize that we need to develop more native plugins. And we even set up this goal for ourselves. So in the 11 years of Grafana, together with community, we created 150 data sources, and actually more than half of that was created by community. But now we want to push this forward, and we set this goal to scale up to 200 native data sources in 1 year. But creating native data sources, it comes with cost, right? So it takes a lot of time and effort, and also even though we use like reusable SDKs and components, we still find ourselves that we repeat certain parts of code bases. And as we develop and maintain a number of our plugins, it grows, also grows the maintenance cost, and it becomes much harder to keep all of these plugins consistent. So how can we overcome all these challenges? How can we achieve the goal of 200 data sources in a single year? Well, of course, we're going to use more of reusable components, so we create them more. For example, there's already authentication component that has been used across various data sources in the configuration page. And we will use improved tooling. As we shared today, there was created the Grafana Create plugin package that is used for scaffolding, the bundling plugin. And we will use automation. For example, very recently, there was the plugin end-to-end test NPM package published, I think version 1.0, which we use for end-to-end tests across various Grafana versions. But all this is still not enough, so we're going to innovate. And for that, of course, we're going to use the Grafana Labs hackathons that are regularly organized. And as you already know, many features that are now available to users and our customers were started as hackathon projects. Well, what we can say, of course, definitely we don't want to stay here. We want to move forward. We're going to go beyond Infinity. and what you can expect from us in the future. Of course, more new features delivered to Infinity, as Sriram already mentioned, and also to our existing native data sources. Much more native data source plugins created, and improvements to create and maintain our plugins. And who knows, maybe next year, maybe we'll be standing here and sharing how exactly we achieved this 200 goal, which new features we delivered, and how it's very easy to create and maintain plugin at this point.
And to add what Andriy said, if you are an enterprise customer or if you are a consumer of Grafana, if you are looking for some plugin and you are waiting for the plugin, you don't need to wait for the plugin to available. You can try with Infinity and try more things.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all from us at this point. If you want to hear more on plugins, consider joining these sessions from our colleagues later today. And we'll be available after the talk in the Ask the Experts booth. So feel free to come and ask questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.